Claire Morgan remembered the exact second her life changed, and it wasn't when the grief of her mother's funeral settled into the hollow of her chest. It wasn't when she boarded the crowded evening flight with her 5-year-old daughter sleeping heavily against her arm, or when she tucked away the last piece of her mother's belongings in a suitcase that still smelled faintly of lavender. No, the moment her life shifted was 32 minutes after takeoff, when a stranger behind her whispered something obscene, and the quiet man beside her shifted in his seat like a storm about to rise. The cabin lights were dimmed to a soft amber glow, blending with the low hum of the engines. Rowan slept curled against her side, warm and trusting, small breaths brushing against Claire's jacket sleeve. It was the first time her daughter had slept so deeply in days. Grief had robbed both of them of rest. Claire tried not to think about the funeral, the closed casket, the people she barely recognized offering sympathy she didn't know how to accept. She tried not to think about how alone she felt now, truly alone, with the last person who had ever supported her gone. She pulled her jacket tighter around her body and leaned slightly away from the aisle to avoid brushing against the man in the next seat. He hadn't spoken a single word since boarding. Dressed in a dark hoodie with the hood down, he sat with a kind of controlled stillness she'd rarely seen in civilians. Not rigid but disciplined, a posture that suggested years of training, or a habit of remaining alert even when appearing relaxed. His eyes stayed forward, scanning nothing, or maybe everything, with quick flickers of focus. She didn't mind the silence, she welcomed it, actually. It was the first peace she'd had all day. Then came the voice. "Bet you'd be warmer without that jacket, sweetheart." The whisper landed on her neck, like something damp and crawling. Claire froze. She knew that tone, arrogant, invasive, testing. She didn't turn around. She didn't give him the satisfaction. Another whisper followed, closer this time, and she felt it, a deliberate touch against the back of her seat, slow fingertips tracing the top edge like a warning or a promise. Rowan stirred but remained asleep. Claire straightened her spine. "Please don't touch me," she said quietly, firmly. Her voice did not shake, but her hands did. A small mocking laugh answered her. She could feel the man leaning forward, ready to say more. Before he could, the stranger beside her moved. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a jolt or a sudden twist. It was controlled, measured, an adjustment in posture that radiated focus, like a fuse inside him had been silently lit. Claire glanced sideways, barely, and saw his jaw tighten, his shoulders square, his whole presence sharpen. He didn't look at her. He didn't look behind them. He simply became alert. The voice returned. "I said, I can help you with that jacket." Another graze. This time Clark felt fingers slide too close to her shoulder. She inhaled sharply. Rowan whimpered in her sleep. Then the man beside her finally spoke. "Sit back in your seat." His voice was low, steady, and carried a sharpness that cut through the aisle like a blade. It wasn't loud, but every syllable held authority, real authority, the kind no ordinary man possessed. Claire felt the shift in the air. So did the passengers nearby. Heads turned. Muscles tensed. The man behind them scoffed. "What?" The stranger didn't raise his voice. "I said sit. Back. Now." Something in his tone made even Claire's heartbeat hesitate. The harasser muttered something, but the fingers disappeared. A beat later, he sank back into his seat, grumbling. Claire let out a shaky breath, careful not to wake Rowan. She kept her eyes forward. She didn't want gratitude to spill out. She didn't want vulnerability to show. But she knew what had just happened. Someone had stepped in where she had been forced to stand alone for years. The man beside her leaned just slightly in her direction, not enough to invade her space, just enough for her to hear. "Ignored behavior escalates," he murmured, calm as a warning. "You spoke up. That was enough." Her throat tightened. She whispered, "Thank you." He nodded once, as if thanks were unnecessary. Rowan shifted again, and Claire soothed her gently. When she lifted her eyes, she noticed something she hadn't before, something hanging faintly beneath the neckline of the man's hoodie. Dog tags. She blinked. Before she could fully process it, He reached up and slowly unzipped the front of his hoodie. The fabric parted, revealing the metallic gleam of military identification catching the golden cabin light. He turned his head toward her for the first time, and his eyes, cool, focused, unshakable, met hers. And in that moment, Claire understood. He wasn't just a quiet passenger. He was trained. He was dangerous. And he had just chosen to protect her. Ethan Hale had promised himself he'd keep a low profile. No complications, no attention, no slipping back into the instincts that had carved themselves into his bones over 13 years of service. He was supposed to be invisible on this flight, just another tired passenger on a commercial jet headed home after a classified assignment he still couldn't fully talk about. But the moment the woman beside him stiffened, the moment fear flashed across her face like a fragment of lightning, every old instinct rose in him with a precision he hadn't been able to bury. He kept his breathing measured, controlled. The hum of the cabin faded into the background as he listened, really listened, to her breathing, to the movement behind them, to the soft, deliberate scrape of fingers along her seat. The man behind them wasn't just being rude. He was testing boundaries, probing reactions, escalating with each attempt. Predatory behavior followed a pattern, and this man was checking every box. Ethan didn't like the tension in the woman's shoulders. He didn't like the way her hand trembled as she kept her little girl pressed close. And he didn't like the familiar, unpleasant surge of adrenaline threading through his veins, too reminiscent of deployments he'd rather forget. The VA called it heightened situational response. He called it what it was, instinct wired by trauma. His commanding officer had told him before leaving base, "Hale, you're on leave. Don't analyze threats. Don't intervene. Rest." Right. As if sitting still while a woman was targeted was something he could switch off. He watched the man behind them lean forward again, watched fingers creep toward the woman's shoulder, and something in Ethan snapped into place. Calm, cold, controlled. The version of himself he only became when someone else needed him. His voice came out low, the tone he hadn't used outside of missions, a warning shaped like steel. "Sit back. Now." He'd felt the shift. So had half the aisle. For a few minutes, the cabin settled. The woman, Claire, he heard the pilot announce her name on the manifest earlier when helping a flight attendant with a seating issue, held her daughter a little tighter. He kept his eyes forward, pretending not to notice the way she breathed out a quiet thank you. Her voice had the fragile tremble of someone who had learned to survive without help. He respected that. He should have stopped there. But the man behind them wasn't finished. Subtle movements began again, shifting, muttering, the restless energy of someone deciding whether to cause more trouble. Ethan's nerves prickled. He scanned the aisle, the lighting, the distance to the cockpit door. He noted the turbulence beginning to ripple under the aircraft, soft at first but growing. Bad timing. Turbulence always emboldened unstable passengers. He needed to alert someone before the situation escalated. He stood slowly, stretching, pretending to reach for the overhead bin. As he stepped into the aisle, his hand brushed his sleeve in 3 silent gestures, movements so discreet no civilian would notice. But anyone trained by the Air Force Security Division would. A signal for crew attention. A request for quiet approach. A warning of a potential in-flight disturbance. He didn't even look back at Claire. He didn't want to scare her more. A flight attendant approached, her expression polite but curious, like she'd caught something but wasn't sure what. Ethan leaned slightly into the galley area near the cockpit, out of direct sight from other passengers. The hum of controls vibrated faintly through the bulkhead. The attendant's eyes flicked down, registering his dog tags, the type only active-duty officers carried. "Ma'am," Ethan said quietly, keeping his voice neutral, "you may have a problem in row 22. She inhaled, a tiny, knowing breath, too knowing for his comfort. Before he could offer more detail, the aircraft jolted with a sudden drop of altitude, sending a ripple of gasps through the cabin. Turbulence. Unpredictable tonight. The lights flickered, then stabilized. Ethan braced himself automatically, his body reacting before his mind could catch up. The attendant steadied herself against the wall. For a moment, Her professional smile slipped, revealing something else: fatigue, concern, familiarity. She lowered her voice. "Sir, we've dealt with him before." Ethan's jaw tightened. Before he could ask how or what that meant, the aircraft shuddered again, harder this time. Passengers cried out. The lights dimmed, and behind them, Ethan heard the man's voice rising again, louder, angrier. This wasn't over. The word "before" rattled inside Claire like loose change. Before. As in, this wasn't the first time the man behind her had targeted someone. As in, there had been other complaints, other women, other moments of fear swallowed in silence. She sat stiffly in her seat, her fingers brushing the soft curls on her daughter's head, grounding herself in something solid before her thoughts spiraled. The cabin lights flickered with the turbulence, shadows shifting over the rows like restless ghosts. All she could think about was what "before" meant and how many people had been ignored. The man behind her wasn't just obnoxious. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't misbehaving. No, he was something worse. Entitled, deliberate, dangerous, and apparently protected. She heard the whispers drifting from a few rows back, passengers murmuring recognition. Someone said his name under their breath. A CEO. Tech money. Big company. Big ego. A man who threw his weight around often enough that it became a pattern. Of course. Men like him always seemed to float above consequences, buoyed by boardrooms and lawyers and reputations polished with PR money. She hated the way her stomach twisted. She hated the guilt swelling in her chest, guilt that didn't even make sense. It wasn't her fault. She knew that. But as passengers glanced her way, some sympathetic, some curious, some annoyed, Claire felt the old familiar burn in her throat. The feeling she'd experienced too many times as a single mom. Am I causing trouble? Am I making this worse? Should I have just kept quiet? The questions dragged at her like weights. Then Ethan returned. He didn't speak at first. He simply settled back into his seat beside her with a quiet certainty, the kind that felt like leaning into a wall that would never give way. His presence alone steadied her pulse. He hadn't removed his hoodie again, but she noticed the outline of the dog tags beneath it, a silent reminder that he wasn't just some quiet stranger. He carried authority in the way he breathed, in the way he scanned the cabin, in the way his jaw tightened whenever the harasser shifted in his seat. Claire exhaled softly, trying to fight the tremble in her voice. I didn't mean to cause a scene." He turned his head, the faintest crease between his brows. "You didn't," he said. "Men like him depend on you thinking you did." That shut her guilt down like a switch being flipped. Claire swallowed. The attendant said, "He's done this before." Ethan nodded once, slow and grim. "And they're tired of cleaning up after him." It struck her in a way she didn't expect, that he believed her instantly, without doubt, without hesitation, without asking if she misunderstood. Her eyes burned, but she blinked hard. She didn't want him to see that. The cabin jolted again with turbulence, but Ethan didn't move, his hand resting lightly on the armrest between them, not touching her, but close enough that she felt its warmth like a promise. "He won't touch you again." His voice was low, steady, almost gentle. "Not while I'm here." Something inside her, something knotted and bruised from years of doing everything alone, loosened just a little. But the relief lasted only a heartbeat. Because suddenly, the CEO, the man with the expensive watch and rotten grin, rose from his seat. He straightened his jacket, cracked his knuckles, and took a deliberate step down the aisle. And he was walking straight toward them. Ethan's pulse didn't spike. His training wouldn't allow it, but his jaw clenched like a loaded hinge. The moment the man stepped into the aisle, swagger rolling off him like cologne, Ethan rose with a calm so controlled it bordered on dangerous. He didn't make a sound, didn't posture, didn't tense his shoulders like a man preparing for a fight. He simply stood, filling the narrow aisle with quiet authority, the kind that came from years of walking into far worse situations than an entitled CEO on a passenger jet. Still, his muscles hummed under his skin, coiled and ready. The man's grin faltered as he realized Ethan wasn't moving. "Excuse me," he said, voice oily. You're in my way. Ethan didn't blink. Return to your seat. Gasps fluttered through the rows around them like wings. A flight this full couldn't hide tension, not when it spread this quickly. Heads popped up over seatbacks. A few phones rose discreetly, red lights blinking. Passengers knew something was happening, and whether for safety or spectacle, they were recording. That pressure formed a hot, invisible spotlight over all three of them. The man scoffed, taking another step forward. You don't tell me what to do. Ethan expected that. Men like him never responded to calm authority, only to the threat of losing control. But Ethan refused to escalate the situation. He positioned his body diagonally, blocking the aisle without touching him, a stance designed to slow an aggressor without provoking one. Return to your seat, he repeated, tone unchanged. The man's nostrils flared. He jabbed a finger toward Claire, started this. You two think you can humiliate me? Do you have any idea who I am? A ripple of discomfort spread through the cabin. Claire shifted behind Ethan, her breath trembling. Ethan didn't turn toward her. Doing so would invite the man forward. Instead, he kept his gaze locked on the threat. Controlled. Calculated. Under the noise of the cabin, his thoughts ran like a silent checklist. De-escalate. Protect Claire and the child. Avoid physical contact until absolutely necessary. But the man misread Ethan's restraint as weakness. He shoved Ethan's shoulder. It wasn't hard. It wasn't even effective. But it was intentional. Phones rose higher. Someone whispered. He pushed him. Another said, "Get security." A child whimpered somewhere near the back. Inside Ethan, something clicked into a colder gear. He didn't push back. Instead, he angled his head just slightly, voice now holding the unmistakable edge of command. Sit. Down. The man stepped back, micro steps, barely noticeable, but Ethan saw every centimeter of retreat. Claire's voice came from behind him, quiet but steady. Please, she said, not begging, asserting. Leave us alone. Ethan heard the strength in her voice and let her speak, not overshadowing her. His stance held the line. Her voice gave it meaning. Together, the two of them created something the man hadn't expected, resistance with both backbone and witness. The harasser snarled. You people are insane. I'll sue both of you. I'll own this airline. You hear me? Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because at that moment, the intercom beeped overhead. A crackle of static followed, then the captain's voice filled the cabin, not urgent, but firm. Major Hale, report to the forward galley. Claire gasped. Several passengers gasped. Even a few phones lowered. The CEO's eyes widened. Major, he repeated, stumbling over the word. The fight drained from his face in a single startled exhale. Ethan didn't break eye contact. Return to your seat, he said for the final time. This time the man obeyed, sort of spitting curses under his breath. He backed into the aisle wall as if trying to make himself smaller. But before he could retreat fully, the attendants arrived, two of them, moving with the practiced decisiveness of people who'd been warned this might happen. Sir, one said sharply, you need to come with us. Now. The man protested. Loudly. Dramatically. Talking about lawyers, shareholders, consequences, misconduct. But the passengers were no longer on his side. The cameras had caught enough. A few people openly glared. Someone muttered. About time. Ethan didn't shift until the attendants guided the man forward, toward the front cabin, away from Claire and her child. Only then did Ethan exhale and step aside. Claire looked up at him, her eyes wide not with fear this time, but realization. Major Hale, she whispered. You're military. He didn't answer. Not here. Not with the cabin watching him like a live broadcast. The attendants ushered the CEO through the curtain to the front section. Temporary isolation. The noise of his protests faded as the curtain swayed closed behind him. But before it sealed completely, the man twisted around, eyes locking on Ethan's. His voice dropped to a low, venomous promise. You'll regret this. The curtain snapped shut, and the cabin fell into a charged, uneasy silence. Claire had survived turbulence before, but never the kind that came disguised as a man with power. With the CEO moved to the front cabin, the pressure in her lungs finally loosened, but only slightly. Her hand shook as she tucked the blanket around Lily, who had slept through most of the commotion. For a moment, Claire allowed herself to believe the worst was over. But the plane suddenly dipped with a sharp jolt, sending a wave of gasps through the aisle. Overhead compartments rattled, cups slid, and a few passengers clutched armrests like lifelines. The aircraft steadied, but the air felt charged, unpredictable, electric. Lily stirred, eyes fluttering open. "Mommy?" Claire smoothed her daughter's hair, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "It's okay, baby. Just bumps." Before she could fully calm her, Ethan gently leaned toward her side of the row. "Hey, Lily," he said softly, voice warm in a way Claire hadn't heard before. "Do you like roller coasters?" Lily blinked at him, half awake. "Sometimes." "Well," he said with an easy grin, "this plane is just doing a teeny tiny roller coaster. And your mom and I, we're really good at roller coasters." Lily giggled, quiet but real, and curled her face into her mother's arm. Claire's heart stuttered, not from fear this time, but from the unexpected tenderness in Ethan's voice. A few moments ago, he'd stood like a wall of steel between her and danger. Now he was soft, warm, careful. The contrast disarmed her more than the threat had. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's nothing," he replied. But the way his eyes softened made her think it wasn't nothing at all. As Lily drifted back to sleep, the turbulence thickened, small jerks, then bigger ones. The captain's voice crackled overhead, advising seatbelts remain fastened. Claire bit down on the fear rising in her chest. She hated flying, hated not being in control, hated the reminders of how fragile everything could be. Grief, exhaustion, and adrenaline swirled in her like a storm. Maybe that was why the words came out. "My mom died last week," she said quietly, staring at the seat back ahead.
"Cancer. Fast."
"Brutal." Ethan's expression shifted, something like recognition, something like sorrow. He didn't offer cliches or sympathy that felt hollow. He simply listened. "I'm just trying to hold it together," Claire continued. "For her." She glanced at Lily. "For me. And then this happens, and I feel like I'm failing at everything." "You're not failing," Ethan said immediately, his voice low, firm, and warm all at once. "You protected your daughter. You stood up for yourself. You asked him to stop. That takes strength." Claire swallowed, throat tight. His words settled somewhere deep, deeper than she meant to let them. "And being a single mom," Ethan exhaled, almost a sigh. "That's not failing. That's carrying the weight of two people alone." The plane jolted again. Claire's hand shot to the armrest, and she saw Ethan's hand tighten at the same time, fast, instinctive, the kind of reaction born from muscle memory, not fear. His other hand curled into a fist, knuckles pale. His shoulders stiffened, breath shallow for 1 second too long. She knew that look. She had seen that exact flinch in her brother after he returned from deployment. Hypervigilance. Triggered instinct. Unseen wounds. Ethan wasn't afraid. He was bracing for something only he could see. Something he had lived through before. "You okay?" she whispered.
His jaw tightened. "Yeah."
"Just turbulence." But Claire knew better. She didn't push. She simply shifted her hand a little closer to his on the armrest, not touching but close enough that if he needed grounding, he could reach for it. He noticed. He didn't move away. For the first time on the flight, they sat not as strangers thrown together by chance, but as two people quietly recognizing each other's cracks. The plane continued to rattle, but the silence between them felt steadier than anything around them. Until a flight attendant barreled down the aisle, eyes wide, breath short. She skidded to a stop beside them. "He's trying to force his way back." And the calm shattered instantly. There were threats, and then there were men who didn't learn the first time. Ethan rose the moment he saw the flight attendant sprinting down the aisle, panic carved into her expression. He moved before she even finished whispering, "He's trying to force his way back." Claire instinctively gathered her daughter closer, But Ethan didn't glance back. Doing so would only slow him down. He stepped into the aisle with a measured calm that felt like an old uniform sliding back onto his bones. This time, he wasn't intercepting a surprise. This time, he was expecting him. The CEO shoved through the curtains at the front, chest puffed, face red with entitlement and intoxicated self-importance. His voice boomed across the cabin. "This is harassment. You can't detain me. Do you know who I am?" The passengers flinched at the volume, but no one moved to help him. Ethan walked forward with a steady gait, each step deliberate, quiet, but carrying weight. The kind of walk that made grown men rethink their decisions. The CEO spotted him and smirked. "You again," he sneered. "The wannabe tough guy." He jabbed a finger at Ethan's chest.
Move.
"I'm getting back to my seat." "You were instructed to stay in the front cabin," Ethan said, voice cool as steel. No anger, no heat, just a fact. He could feel the cabin watching, the tension hanging like a held breath. Phones were up again, recording every second. The harasser leaned forward, breath sour with arrogance. "I can ruin you," he hissed. "Ruin her. You understand? I have lawyers who breathe fire. I have friends on the FAA board. You mess with me, and I'll make sure you never." Ethan stepped closer, shrinking the space between them to an inch. "Return to the front cabin." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The authority in it was unmistakable. Passengers began murmuring, discontent spreading like a ripple. "You pushed her seat." He threatened her. "He's lying." "I saw the whole thing." Claire's voice joined the chorus, quiet but firm. "He tried to touch me." People saw. Heads nodded. Even the couple in row 21 raised their hands. "We recorded it," one said sharply, glaring at the CEO. "So, don't pretend." For the first time, the man's confidence faltered. But he covered it with a laugh, sharp, ugly. "Oh, please. You people want a viral moment. Do you think you matter? I'll buy every video on this plane. I'll bury all of you." Ethan's jaw flexed. Internal alarms fired. His training told him to stay calm, stay controlled, not escalate. But the man's leaning posture, clenched fists, narrowed eyes, all signs Ethan recognized. He was preparing to lunge. "You're done intimidating her," Ethan said, voice darker than he intended. "And you're done walking this aisle." "Oh, really?" the CEO spat. "Because I can do whatever I—" A voice interrupted behind Ethan. "That's far enough, sir." Ethan didn't turn, but the shift in the air was palpable. Someone had stepped closer, the energy different, trained, observant, alert. The CEO blinked. "And who the hell are you supposed to be?" The man beside Ethan flashed a badge, so subtly most passengers didn't see it. But Ethan did. "Federal Air Marshal." The marshal's eyes flicked to Ethan. "Major Hale," he said under his breath, just loud enough for Ethan to hear. "We need to talk." Ethan kept his gaze on the CEO. "You have jurisdiction?" "Not officially," the marshal murmured. "Not unless he becomes a direct threat." His voice hardened faintly. "And he's been towing that line for weeks." Ethan finally shifted his attention, only slightly. "Weeks." The marshal nodded once, quick and sharp. "He's been on our radar. Harassment, intimidation, tampering with crew instructions. Multiple incidents, no arrests. He's slippery and well-connected." His eyes flicked to Claire. "And he escalated tonight." Ethan felt the thrum of clarity, pieces falling into place. "So, what do you need?" "A witness with authority," the marshal said quietly. "Someone who can help detain him until landing. Someone he can intimidate." He glanced at Ethan's dog tags peeking beneath his shirt. "Someone like you." The CEO scoffed. "Oh, that's cute. Two heroes. What are you going to do? Handcuff me with good intentions?" The marshal stepped forward. "Sir, I'm advising you to return to your cabin immediately." "And if I don't?" the CEO snarled. Ethan took one slow breath. "Then we will make you." For the first time, real fear flickered through the CEO's eyes. He hesitated, looked from Ethan to the marshal. looked at the passengers glaring, looked at the dozens of phones recording. He took one step back. And that was enough. The marshal leaned closer to Ethan, voice barely a whisper. "Major Hale, will you assist?" The answer mattered. For the plane. For Claire. For whatever came next. And the chapter ended with Ethan's breath held in his throat, as he prepared to say yes. Claire had never been more grateful for the sound of landing gear slamming into asphalt. The jolt rippled through the cabin, but to her it felt like salvation. The nightmare in the air was finally coming down to earth. Beside her, Ethan didn't flinch, not even a muscle, but she could feel the tension humming off him, a quiet readiness that hadn't faded since the confrontation. Her daughter leaned against her shoulder, half asleep, unaware of the chaos that had stretched across thousands of feet in the sky. As the wheels screeched and the plane slowed, Claire's breath caught. The moment the doors opened, reality would come rushing for them. She wasn't ready for the world outside, or for whatever storm the Harassed planned next. When the seatbelt sign dinged off, a ripple of murmurs rose through the cabin. People who had witnessed everything were whispering, pulling out phones, gathering their bags. Some glanced toward Claire with sympathetic eyes. Others looked at Ethan with a kind of awe usually reserved for superheroes. Claire tried to shrink into herself, but Ethan gently angled his body in front of her, shielding her from the stares without making it obvious. Always aware. Always protecting. The plane rolled to the gate. The door unlocked with a metallic click, and almost instantly, she saw them. Police. 3 officers. Waiting. Claire's heart sank. Oh no. Oh no, no, no. Ethan leaned down and murmured, "You're fine. They're not here for you." His calmness steadied her, like a hand on her pulse. But the moment they stepped into the jet bridge, chaos met them head-on. Cameras. Reporters.
Lights.
Voices. A wall of noise.
Ma'am.
Did he attack you? Sir, what's your name? Is it true he threatened a child? Is the Air Force involved? Claire froze. Her throat locked. Her arms tightened protectively around her daughter. Every instinct screamed to run, hide, disappear. Ethan didn't hesitate. His hand settled on her back, warm, steady, protective, and he guided her forward with quiet authority. "This way," he murmured, steering her past the crowd. His calm cut through the chaos like a knife, shielding her from the worst of the flashing cameras. "Don't look at them. Eyes on me." Claire couldn't help it. She did. And in that moment, she saw why the reporters were here. Someone, maybe multiple passengers, had already posted the video. Ethan blocking the harasser. His voice, low and commanding. Claire crying, clutching her daughter. The confrontation. The moment Ethan stood, unmovable as steel, protecting them, her stomach dropped. "Oh my God. Ethan, it's everywhere." He didn't answer. His jaw tightened, but his hand stayed steady on her back. "Just keep walking." At the end of the terminal, another shock hit her. A row of lawyers in tailored suits, all wearing the same emblem on their badges, the harasser's corporate logo. The harasser himself wasn't there. He had been taken off separately, but his team was waiting like wolves. Claire's breath hitched. She felt herself shrinking again, bracing for the attack. But Ethan stepped in front of her, body a shield. "She won't be speaking," he said sharply, with the kind of authority that cut through the air like a locked command. "And neither will I." One of the lawyers sneered. "You're making a mistake, Major Hale." Claire's eyes widened. "Major?" She thought she knew he was important, but hearing his rank spoken aloud sent a shiver through her. Before she could say anything, the crowd parted. A matte black military SUV rolled up to the curb. Windows tinted. Engine rumbling. Doors unlocking with a mechanical snap. Ethan exhaled once, the first shaky breath she'd seen from him. "Claire," he turned to her, eyes suddenly softer, heavier, burdened by something unspoken. "There's something I haven't told you." Some secrets were medals, others were burdens, and Ethan Hale had carried both long enough to know the difference. As the black military SUV idled at the curb, its engine thrumming like a warning, Ethan felt the weight of every truth he hadn't wanted to speak. Claire stood beside him, her daughter tucked protectively in her arms, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. She deserved clarity. She deserved safety. But the truth he owed her was laced with danger. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What's going on?" He opened the SUV door, but didn't usher her inside yet. Instead, he stepped between her and the world, shielding her from the crowd, the lawyers, the cameras, everything. "Claire, I wasn't on that plane by accident." Her breath hitched. "What do you mean?" "I've been working a classified assignment," he said quietly, every word measured. "I can't give you everything, but you need to know enough to protect yourself." Claire clutched her daughter tighter. "Is this about the man on the plane?" Ethan nodded.
Partly.
"But he wasn't just a harasser with a temper. He's connected to someone I've been tracking." His jaw tightened. "Someone dangerous. Someone with reach." Claire's face paled. "The CEO? They said he was powerful, wealthy, but what does he have to do with you?" "His company has been on our radar for months," Ethan said. "Financial irregularities, covert transactions, connections to groups we monitor." He lowered his voice even more. "I was flying undercover to observe a potential courier. Your harasser wasn't my target, but he's tied to the man who is." Claire stared at him, stunned into silence. Ethan wished he could stop there. But she needed the whole truth, at least the part he was allowed to share. "He might have approached you randomly," Ethan continued, "but the moment I intervened, I recognized him. He's been on our watch list." He paused. "And the CEO protecting him has a long history of making problems disappear." Claire swallowed hard. "And now I'm a problem?" "Not intentionally." Ethan's voice softened. "You were caught in a situation you didn't ask for. But once you stood up to him, and once I exposed myself by stepping in, you became visible. Too visible." Claire looked down at her daughter, brushing a hand through her hair. "So what happens now?" Ethan hesitated, a rare crack in his armor. "Now I have to keep you safe. Both of you." The door of the SUV opened from inside. A uniformed officer nodded once at Ethan. He replied with a quick gesture, one Claire didn't understand, but she sensed it meant urgency. Ethan helped her inside. Claire slid in with her daughter on her lap, and Ethan followed, closing the door behind them. The interior was dim, quiet, sealed away from the storm outside. Claire turned toward him. "Ethan, please just tell me everything." Her voice wasn't fearful now, it was steady, stronger than before. Something inside Ethan shifted. Respect, admiration, and something else he refused to name. He raked a hand through his hair, exhaling. "That man, the one who threatened you, he wasn't acting alone." Claire stiffened. "What does that mean?" "During the confrontation," Ethan said, "someone else on the plane wasn't recording for social media. They were recording you, specifically you." Claire's blood ran cold. "Me? Why?" "We don't know yet. But the air marshal intercepted part of a transmission after the landing. Someone sent the video to a private, encrypted group within minutes." Claire's hand flew to her mouth. "Why would they do that?" "I'm nobody." Ethan shook his head.
No.
"You're a witness. And they want leverage. Or a way to control the story." Claire's breathing turned ragged. Her daughter stirred against her, sensing the tension. Ethan leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm.
"Hey."
"Look at me."
She did.
"You didn't do anything wrong," he said. "This isn't your fault. Someone powerful is trying to cover their tracks, and you happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I will not let anything happen to you." Her eyes glistened. "Why are you helping us?" "Really?" For a moment, Ethan couldn't speak. Because he'd seen her fear. Because he'd seen her courage. Because he'd seen the way she held her daughter, like she was her entire world. Because he felt something in her presence he hadn't felt in a long, long time. He swallowed. "Because I can't walk away from this. Or from you." Claire's breath caught, something soft flickering in her eyes, but before either could say more, Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and every muscle in his body went rigid. No greeting. No signature. Just a single encrypted message from his team. Major Hale, target shift. New intel confirms. Claire's daughter is a target now. Ethan's vision tunneled. He looked at Claire, her wide eyes, her trembling hands, her child's innocent face. Then he whispered, voice tight as steel. Claire, it's worse than we thought. Every mother has a breaking point, and Claire just met hers. The moment Ethan read the message, the air inside the SUV changed. It thickened, sharpened, turned electric with danger. Claire didn't understand the encryption on his screen, but she understood his face, how all color drained from it, how the soldier in him snapped awake like a trigger pulled. Ethan, she whispered, her voice cracking. What does it say? He looked at her daughter first. Not at Claire. At the child. And that told Claire everything she needed to know. Her heartbeat stuttered. Ethan, tell me. He turned fully toward her, his tone low, steady, deliberate, like he was trying to hold her together with his voice alone. The threat isn't vague anymore. Someone has been waiting. A short pause. For her. The world slid sideways. Claire clutched her daughter so tightly the little girl whimpered. No, 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 this isn't happening. She couldn't breathe.
Couldn't think.
Her skin felt too tight, her chest too small. Grief, exhaustion, fear, everything collided at once, a tidal wave swallowing her whole. Ethan shifted closer. Claire, listen to me. Panic won't help us. I need you grounded. I need you with me. But seconds ago she'd been fine. Or pretending to be. Now every cell in her body screamed. I'm losing everything, she choked. First my mom, and now. You aren't losing her, Ethan said fiercely. Not on my watch. He signaled the driver with a hand gesture. The SUV lurched forward, weaving through airport traffic with military precision. Sirens began to rise from a distance. Airport security, he said, but Claire barely heard him over the roar of her own terror. What do they want with her? Claire's voice shook violently. Why my baby? We don't know yet, Ethan said. But we will. And I promise you, we're shutting this down. The SUV screeched into a restricted entry service lane. Air Force security personnel were already waiting, armed, alert, their movement sharp. Ethan barked an order, and they responded instantly, forming a diamond formation around her as they hurried her inside through a private gate. Claire had never felt more helpless. She clutched her daughter's tiny hand, terrified it would slip away. Her legs shook so badly Ethan finally put a hand on her back, and the moment he did, something inside her steadied. Not much. Just enough to keep moving. Inside an unmarked security corridor, Claire finally collapsed against the wall, her daughter whimpering on her shoulder. Claire. Ethan knelt in front of her, looking directly into her eyes. I know it feels like everything is falling apart, but you're stronger than this moment. No, she whispered. I'm not. Tears streamed down her face.
She's all I have.
I can't, Ethan. I can't lose her. He reached up and brushed a tear from her cheek, a gesture so gentle it nearly shattered her. You're not losing her. I swear it. Her breathing slowed just enough for the world to sharpen. Enough for her to recognize something inside her. A spark. Small, flickering, but real. She wasn't the fragile woman shaking in an airplane seat anymore. She wasn't the silent one taking insults, or the grieving daughter bearing loss after loss. She was a mother. And mothers fought. Tell me what to do, Claire said, voice steadier. Tell me how to help keep her safe. Ethan nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. Good. Stay close. Don't let go of her. And when I say move, you move. Claire nodded. The radio at Ethan's hip crackled sharply. Security to Major Hale, be advised. We just intercepted a male suspect loitering at baggage claim. He was carrying a sign with a child's name on it. Claire's stomach dropped. Her blood turned to ice. My daughter's name? Her name? Ethan shot to his feet. Show me. The security officer held out a tablet. On the screen was a blurry feed of a man pretending to wait for a passenger pickup, holding a sign with her daughter's name handwritten across it. Claire pressed her hand to her mouth, choking on a sob. Ethan muttered something sharp under his breath, military words, dark ones. The kind that made the air seem lethal. He turned back to Claire. We're securing the area. No one gets near you. No one gets near her. Claire wasn't shaking anymore. She was furious. Ethan, she said, voice trembling but determined, don't leave us. Not even for a second. He didn't hesitate. I won't, he said. Not for anything. And she believed him. Protection had been instinct. What came next was choice. Ethan watched as airport security and federal agents moved like a tightening net, each piece snapping into place around the men responsible. The harasser was already in handcuffs, swearing and sputtering as two officers pushed him toward a transport vehicle. The man from baggage claim was cuffed beside him, silent, eyes dark with the knowledge that his plan had failed. Ethan stood a few feet away, rigid with controlled intensity, arms crossed over his chest as he monitored every detail. This was what he was trained for. Crisis. Intervention. Precision. But now that the threat was neutralized, his instincts didn't settle the way they should have. His gaze kept flicking back to Claire and her daughter. Not because of remaining danger, but because walking away felt wrong in a way nothing in his training had prepared him for. A federal agent approached. Major Hale, you're clear. You can stand down. But Ethan didn't. Not until Claire finished giving her statement. She stood under harsh fluorescent lights, her daughter on her hip, speaking with a calmness that made Ethan's chest tighten. A few hours ago, she'd been trembling. Now she was steady, strong, fierce even. Watching her reclaim her power did something to him, something that unsettled and grounded him at the same time. When she finished, the agent nodded and stepped away. Claire turned toward Ethan, meeting his eyes. And just like that, the hardness inside him unspooled. He walked to her slowly, deliberately. You did incredibly well in there. Claire let out a shaky breath. Only because you were here. He shook his head.
No.
Because you're stronger than you think. Her eyes glistened, not with fear this time, but with something softer. Gratitude.
Connection.
Something blooming quietly between them, fragile but unmistakable. Before he could say more, his phone vibrated. A message from command, short, clipped, mission-coded. Orders. He swallowed, jaw tightening. Not now. Not when the danger had barely passed. Not when the air around them had shifted into something unspoken and real. Claire noticed instantly. Bad news. Ethan exhaled slowly. Deployment. Her face fell, just a flicker, but enough to punch the air from his lungs. When? Soon, he said. But he held up the phone. There's a caveat. You and your daughter will have federal protection until I return. You won't be alone. A small breath escaped her, half relief, half ache. I didn't expect you to stay forever, she whispered. But I didn't expect it to hurt, either. Ethan stepped closer, voice lowering. Claire, this isn't the end. Something inside her softened, then broke open. The walls she'd kept around her heart easing because, for the first time in years, she believed someone meant their words. Her daughter reached her little hand toward Ethan. He knelt down, meeting the child's eyes with a rare, vulnerable gentleness. I'll be back for both of you, he said, his voice steady as a vow. Claire pressed a hand to her mouth, emotion rising thick in her throat. Ethan stood. Their eyes held. And then, fade to black.